to train your Pegasus. Chapter 6. Snowbolt was feeling better in the morning. She still missed her home and her father, but the sadness was under control at least. The knowledge that another day of soaring practice lay ahead of her improved her mood significantly. She saw that the door of the cave had already been rolled away, and outside the winter sky was bright and clear. Stepping outside, she saw Scarlet was already at work, sweeping away the night's snowfall from the ledge. "Good morning, Pot Pie," Scarlet said without looking. Snowbolt was still a little upset with Scarlet for what she had said the night before.
"Good morning," she
said, flatly. "The winds are a little lighter this morning than they were yesterday, but it should be enough to fly in, and should pick up more in a few hours. You seem to turn well enough, so today you should focus on improving your speed." Snowbolt nodded, then sprinted off the ledge and into the brisk morning wind. She first hovered for a moment to get her bearings, then turned to the south and began soaring back and forth across the face of the slope. She tried her best to gain more speed, but after experimenting with several different wing positions, succeeded only in flailing awkwardly in mid-air. Below, Snowbolt heard Scarlet groan at her efforts. "Absolute rubbish! Come here, Pot Pie. Watch me." Scarlet reached up and snatched Snowbolt out of the air in mid-flight. She held the little pony up at eye level in her claw. "Right now, you're not so much flying as floating. Now, the angle your wings form with your body is called the dihedral angle." Scarlet raised her wings above her so that they formed a right angle with each other. "Right now, you fly like this. A high dihedral angle makes you more stable in flight, but also generates less lift, which means less speed. You must learn to fly with your wings more level." Scarlet leveled her wings to demonstrate. "And this," Scarlet then wiggled the trailing edge of her wings up and down, "is called the angle of attack. Right now you fly with a high angle of attack, which generates more lift at the expense of speed. Fly with your wings more level to the ground." Scarlet leveled her wings front to back to demonstrate. Snowbolt thought she understood.
"Okay."
With that, Scarlet turned Snowbolt around, tossed her into the wind like a paper airplane, then went back to her sweeping. Snowbolt soared back and forth a few times to get her bearings again, then tried to implement what Scarlet had said. Instead of flying with her wings upwards at an angle, she brought them downwards until they were almost level with the horizon. She immediately noticed a loss in stability, but her soaring practice from the days prior had accustomed her to making small adjustments and keeping herself from rolling over. In just a few moments she had adjusted to the change, and she was definitely making the trip from one side of the slope to the other in much less time. Next, she tried tilting her wings downward, changing her angle of attack, as Scarlet had called it. But when she tilted the leading edge of her wings downward to be more level with the horizon, the lift beneath them seemed to give out all at once. Each time she tried, she found herself plummeting downwards, until she panicked and put her wings back to the old position. Snowbolt tried this a few times more, growing more and more frustrated each time. Scarlet, who had stopped sweeping for a moment to watch her, called out to her, "Do not doubt your wings, Pot Pie." It took Snowbolt a few moments to understand what Scarlet meant. She used the next few passes to gain as much altitude as she could, then took a couple more to steel her nerves. After completing a turn to the north, she took a deep breath and tilted her wings downward. She plummeted downwards towards the snow and scree-covered slope as before, but this time she forced herself to not panic and kept her wings at the angle Scarlet had shown her. Then, Just as she was sure she was going to crash into the slope, something remarkable happened. She once again felt the familiar sensation of lift underneath her wings, and her trajectory leveled out. She was once again soaring northwards along the face of the slope, but now she was going fast.
Whoa!
Snowboat said aloud. She had covered the distance from the north side of the slope to the south one in only a fraction of the time it had taken her before, and it was already time to turn. She banked left, the way Cheeki had taught her, and steered around until she had reversed her course, all the while keeping her wings in their new orientation. She had barely finished her turn when she found herself already at the opposite end of the slope, and had to repeat the process again. After a few more passes, Snowboat began to understand. With the leading edge of her wings high, the rising wind from the slope could only just hold her aloft, like a parachute. But with her wings angled lower, her wings would only support her if the wind were moving across them at great speed. Thus, when she shifted from one position to the other, she dropped lower and accelerated until she reached that speed. Compared to the speed she had been flying at before, gliding in her new posture seemed positively breakneck. It took Snowboat a few moments to get comfortable with the new posture, not to mention the increase in flight speed. She was at first confused by the strange sound from just behind her as she flew, until she realized it was the sound of her own wings whooshing through the air. Before long she was enjoying herself immensely.
Yeah!
Snowboat whooped as she banked through another turn. Scarlet, who had finished her sweeping and was now lounging with a book near the mouth of the cave, looked up and watched her for a moment. Knowing Scarlet as she did, Snowboat interpreted her lack of derision as a compliment. Snowboat did not want to stop for lunch, but eventually the burning in her flight muscles forced her to land. She sat down on the ledge and gingerly stretched and folded her wings back against her side. Gliding at high speeds, and turning in particular, required much more exertion than the gentle floating she had been doing before. Scarlet had finished her sweeping and gone back inside the cave. Snowboat could have joined her inside and had some soup left over from dinner last night, but instead simply cleared a small patch of snow with her hoof, and munched on the minty grass beneath while she enjoyed the view. Her thoughts were interrupted when a familiar brown squirrel scurried around the bend towards her.
Cheeki!
Snowboat said, and rushed over to meet her new friend. She scooped Cheeki up with one hoof and brought her up to eye level. As she did so, Cheeki hopped excitedly and nuzzled Snowboat's nose in greeting.
Guess what? I can fly so fast now. Scarlet showed me how.
Cheeki made a high-pitched gasp and clapped her paws together, then scurried up Snowboat's arm, up her back, and mounted atop her head. She spurred her mount excitedly as she tugged on Snowboat's mane.
You want to see, huh? All right, let me show you.
Snowboat got a running start, spread her wings, and leapt into the wind. At first she assumed her old flight posture, soaring gently back and forth a few times, until she gained enough altitude.
Okay, hang on tight,
she said. Then she dove and assumed the new posture. Atop her head she could feel Cheeki squeak in panic and tighten her grip on her mane as she hurtled towards the slope below. Cheeky's grip did not relax until Snowboat had leveled out and completed a few turns, at which point Cheeki began to squeak excitedly. The two of them flew together for the better part of an hour, with Cheeki riding atop Snowboat's head. After some time, Cheeki dismounted Snowboat's head in mid-flight and tried to fly alongside her. The flying squirrel was no longer able to keep up with Snowboat, but by keeping to the inside of every turn while Snowboat swung wide to the outside, the two found they were still able to fly alongside each other in a fashion. The pair spent the next hour practicing flying in formation together, and also matching their courses so Cheeki could mount and dismount Snowboat's head in mid-flight. Some time later, while sitting atop Snowboat's head, Cheeki peered down over Snowboat's brow, to look the young Pegasus in the eye.
What?
Snowbolt asked. In response, the squirrel leaned over and very deliberately touched Snowbolt's nose before leaping off her head and gliding away in the opposite direction.
Oh, you want to play tag, huh? You really think you can outrun me?
With that, she banked and dove after the little squirrel. She was just about to snatch the little thing with her hooves when the little squirrel banked, completely reversing direction almost instantaneously.
Wow,
Snowbolt said, changing direction to follow. The two spent the remainder of the afternoon playing tag. Though Snowbolt had the advantage in pure speed, Cheeky's smaller size meant she had an enormous advantage in maneuverability, and the two proved to be an even match. They chased each other back and forth across the slope all afternoon and into the evening until the sun touched the horizon and Scarlet called Snowbolt inside. Pony and Squirrel landed on the ledge and said their goodbyes. Snowbolt held the little squirrel in her hoof and smiled broadly.
Goodbye, little friend. I had fun today. Can we do this again soon?
Cheeky nodded enthusiastically and turned to leave. After a moment's hesitation, the little squirrel instead turned back and gave Snowbolt a hug, wrapping her tiny arms around Snowbolt's muzzle.
Aww,
Snowbolt said. The two nuzzled for a moment, and with one last wave, Cheeky leaped out of Snowbolt's hoof and glided down the mountain, down to wherever her home was on the valley floor below. Snowbolt winced as she folded her wings and walked back into the cave. The fun she'd had playing with Cheeky that afternoon had temporarily made her forget the pain in her flight muscles, but she was certainly feeling them now. She did not mind, though. The pain she felt was a righteous one, the type of pain that comes with building oneself. Snowbolt decided that she liked the feeling. That night Snowbolt read to Scarlet again, as she had the previous few nights. Neither of them spoke of the unpleasantness from the night before, and any remaining resentment Snowbolt held for Scarlet had vanished in the day's excitement. As she curled up to sleep that night, Snowbolt dreamed of flight, flying impossibly fast, high above the clouds, and watching all of Equestria pass beneath her. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, life for Snowbolt fell into a regular, if completely absurd, pattern. She woke in the morning, and if the winds were favorable, she would practice gliding back and forth across the face of the slope. She would stop only briefly for lunch, taking only as much time as was necessary to gobble up a meal before returning to her practice in the afternoon. About every other day or so, Cheeky would join her, and the two of them would show off the latest tricks they had learned, or play tag, or some other game they made up. In the evenings, Snowbolt usually read to Scarlet until the great dragon fell asleep, and in the morning she would do it all again. Scarlet seemed to take only a passing interest in Snowbolt's practicing, mostly in the form of a jeer or backhanded insult as she loitered on the ledge by the cave, reading her books and munching on precious stones. She still made casual promises to eat Snowbolt the next day, or as soon as her meat got a little less stringy. But so far Scarlet had not made good on these promises. There were times that Snowbolt wondered if Scarlet ever really intended to eat her at all, but she decided it would be best not to bring up the subject herself, lest she goad the dragon into doing just that. All the while Snowbolt was becoming more and more competent at gliding. She learned how the angle of the rising air steepened over each of the mountain's folds and fingers, and she learned to pump and dive over these for extra speed. She became so familiar with the mountain's wind patterns that she could literally fly back and forth across it, with her eyes closed, with complete confidence. The slope became a canvas, and Snowbolt was the artist. Every day her turns grew sharper and tighter. Eventually she learned to bank so far over in a turn that she was completely upside down, then dived and looped around until she was flying in the other direction. She then taught herself the reverse maneuver, performing a half loop until she was upside down and flying in the opposite direction, then making a half roll to right herself again. From there, Snowboat knew the next logical progression was a full loop-de-loop. One afternoon, she and Cheeki decided to go for it. Snowboat soared back and forth across the slope until she had gained as much altitude as the winds would allow, then turned to face the wind and came to a hover.
Are you sure you don't want me to try the first one on my own, Cheeki? I'm not really sure what will happen.
Cheeki chittered bravely in Snowboat's ear, then gripped the Pegasus' mane tightly.
All right then, if you're sure. Here we go.
With that, Snowboat tucked her wings and began a dive. She was going much faster than she had ever flown before, and before long the sound of rushing air in her ears was deafening. Atop her head she could feel Cheeki, hunkering down, making as small cross-section as possible. Snowboat dove for a full 10 seconds, and when she thought she had enough speed, flared her wings and pulled up.
Whoa!
Snowboat had been unprepared for the amount of strain trying to pitch upwards at that speed would put on her wings. It took all the strength she possessed in her fledgling flight muscles to even keep her wings outstretched. But she managed. Pony and Squirrel leveled off their dive, then continued to pitch upward until they were pointed skyward again. Their speed slowed as they approached the apex of the loop, and Snowboat panicked for a moment and began to flail. A quick spur from Cheeki steeled her resolve, and she maintained her pitch until she was upside down, then diving once more towards the slope below. Then they leveled off, completing the loop.
Yeah, we did it!
Snowboat cheered. Atop her head, Cheeki also cheered and patted the filly between the eyebrows in congratulations.
Want to do it again?
Snowboat asked. The little squirrel chittered affirmative, and Snowboat began another dive. The pair spent hours performing loops high above the mountain that was Snowboat's home. They experimented with performing fast, tight loops, straining Snowboat's small wings to their limit. They also made big, lazy loops across the sky, and these Snowboat liked the best of all. She would sometimes close her eyes at the top of each loop and relish the momentary weightlessness of free fall. When she thought she had gotten the hang of that, Snowboat decided to spice it up a bit.
I'm going to try something, Cheeki. Hold on tight.
Snowboat dove until she had the requisite speed, then pitched upwards and climbed. This time, however, when her trajectory was just past vertical, she tucked her wings in and arched her back, slowly tumbling backwards head over heels. After completing a full backward somersault, she opened her wings again and continued her loop. Both she and Cheeki let out a mighty whoop as they completed the maneuver, and Cheeki spurred Snowboat repeatedly, as if to say, "Again! Again!"
Want some more, do you? Okay, here we go.
And Snowboat repeated the maneuver. They performed several more loops with a backwards somersault at the top, and then several more with 2 backflips instead of 1. As she rounded the bottom of another loop, Cheeki spurred her 3 times.
Want to try 3, huh?
She took a moment to visualize the maneuver in her mind, then decided she could just manage it if she got up enough speed.
All right, let's give it a try.
She pitched downward into a dive again, this time for a full 15 seconds, then pitched upwards as hard as the strain on her little wings would allow. When she was just past vertical, she again quickly rolled backwards, tumbling end over end again, this time tucking herself into as small of a ball as possible. She watched ground and sky tumble around her 1, 2, 3 times. After the third, she unballed herself and opened her wings, and found herself streaking straight downwards, already dangerously low to the mountain slope. Snowboat and Cheeki squeaked together. Snowboat pulled up as hard as she could. Her flight muscles screamed in agony from the strain. Slowly, too slowly, for comfort, she pitched upward, practically scraping the slope, but did barely manage to avoid a collision. Snowboat and Cheeki cheered, but Snowboat's flight muscles were also in agony after the extreme maneuver.
Ow, ow, ow,
She said, steering back towards the ledge and landing somewhat more roughly than usual.
Oh man, I'm gonna feel that tomorrow,
She said, gingerly folding her aching wings back against her side. Cheeki scurried down into Snowboat's hoof, looking concerned.
Oh, I'll be fine, Cheeky, don't worry.
Cheeki looked relieved, then seemed to look over Snowboat's head to something behind her.
What? What is it?
Snowboat asked. In response, Cheeki grabbed a tuft of fur on top of her head.
Oh, my mane? What's wrong with it?
She walked over to a small overhang on the slope, where a pool of meltwater had collected. Looking at her reflection, she saw that her mane had been blown backwards from the wind, and was now styled very much like some of the wonderbolts she'd seen in the newspapers.
Wow.
Snowboat carefully probed her new mane style with a hoof.
You know what, Cheeky? I think I like it.